Hey everyone, it's Nick Valenti with NJ Valenti Art, and in this video I want to share some of my process for digital painting. So here I'm just coming in and I'm refining my tiger drawing. This is the reference image that I'm using. Whenever I use reference, I like to just get the overall gesture and an idea of the lighting and such. Make sure I have the proportions correct, but I don't ever use the reference to try to draw it exactly as that photo is. I like to give myself a little bit of freedom and lean on my illustration background a little bit. Just continuing to refine, I'm starting to add in some of the stripes of the tiger. Now the stripes present a very unique opportunity when drawing. The stripes, you can use them to show the form of the tiger. The way the stripes will wrap around, say, the shoulder of the tiger, the belly, the hip, the neck of the tiger. So it's always important to keep in mind the underlying form and how that form is wrapping around, how it takes light and creates shadow. And then we could use these stripes to help emphasize that. And just working in all my details here. I like to get a pretty good base for my drawing because at some point I will start painting over the drawing layer, and I lean heavily on those lines at that point to retain the structure of the drawing. You can really see here how I'm really trying to, as I'm drawing the stripes in, consider the form underneath, especially how it all comes into the center of the chest, and then we'll kind of scale up and wrap around from there, how it's wrapping around the shoulder. It may seem subtle now, but after we start painting and we get the light and shadow in there, it'll really add to the overall form of the tiger. Kind of gotten to a point where I'm happy with where the drawing's at. I like to get enough detail in there so once I start painting I'm not really guessing. I've got my forms laid in, I've got the overall structure, but I also like to leave a little bit of room to make any slight changes as I go along. Here I'm starting to flat in my colors. I always start with the local or base color, and that is really just the color of the object in and of itself. So obviously the tiger is orange with its white spots on the fur. So I'm just trying to lay those base colors in now as they are. And here I start slightly changing those colors a little bit. I'm not really too worried about my major light and shadow right now, but I am looking at my reference image and I'm changing that base color to a lighter tone and hitting the areas that will be hit with light, and then a darker tone for the areas that will eventually be in shadow. So I still consider this my base color layer with your base flat orange, a little light texture, and a little shadow texture. And then also here you can see I've kind of changed my mind on the background. I like to try to find a background that complements the main color. And with the tiger being orange, I always like the way purple kind of interacts and bounces off of orange. But it ended up being a little too much, so I went with that light teal and a lighter, kind of more lighter background here, and I feel like that ended up working a little bit better for the piece in general. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm still working on the base colors, so to speak here. I'm just trying to push them a little bit further, so I'm taking some of the darks and making them a little bit darker. The lights I'm making a little bit lighter and slightly changing some of the color temperatures there. So now I'm starting to consider the lighting of the form a little bit more. And basically we have the light kind of coming from the upper right and behind our tiger, so he's kind of being backlit, which I think gives us a really cool effect. You kind of have the light wrapping around the tiger, and it's a great way of being able to really emphasize the form. So here I'm slowly starting to build up my light and shadows. Now, so far, all of these are on just a normal default color layer. And you can also see here another helpful thing to do is once you've worked on a layer and you've added paint to that layer, you can turn that layer on and off to see how much of a change it's made to your drawing and whether it's a positive change. And now I've got my base colors set up. I've gone ahead and lowered the opacity on my line art layer and created a new painting layer above it. And you can see here now I'm starting to select the colors and paint over my line art. As I'm doing that, I'm focusing more on my final lighting now, considering some of the details as I move along. And I'll move back and forth between the light and the darks here, pushing the lights a little bit lighter, pushing the darks a little bit darker as I get into some more of the details, and I want to start kind of rounding out some of these smaller forms now on the tiger. So the smaller forms being, you know, some of the hair off here on the side of his cheek and jaw, his muzzle as well. And I want to start paying attention to the details of the eyes and start adding some of my darker darks and my lighter lights at this stage. For the tiger stripes here, I decided to go with a much thinner, harder style pencil brush type for the stripes itself, which ended up giving a pretty cool look to the stripes. Was able to kind of get that furry feel and texture. And again, here I'm making sure that I'm changing the width and the variation of the tiger stripes. They're very unique if you ever look at an actual image of a tiger, and obviously I hope you are if you're trying to draw a tiger, but it's really fascinating and quite a bit of fun to draw. Again, it helps you really emphasize the forms of the tiger. And obviously now with the stripes, I'm introducing my darkest darks. That is the stripes are pretty close to black, as close as you're going to get to black without being pure black. So now I've definitely started establishing some of my darker darks, and here in a little bit, when I get to the main shadows, that'll be my final dark tone. Just some more painting over the lines here, focusing in on the ears. Now the eye as well. I'll have to eventually do a whole video on just painting eyes. There's quite a bit to it, and they're a lot of fun. I think that'll be something that we can kind of dive into a little bit more. A few more final details, some touch-ups before I go into main shadows. As I'm painting, adding in the lights and even the darks, I'm always keeping in mind my light source, which I mentioned in this image is basically the upper right and kind of behind the tiger. That way we have the light wrapping around the tiger himself. As I'm continuing here, I do come in with a smaller brush and I start adding some of the finer details, some of the finer fur details as far as highlights and even some shadows go here, just to add a little extra texture, fur texture. And this here is a main process I use for creating the shadows in the image. I've created a new layer and set that to multiply. I have gotten a cooler shadow color. You can see how light the color actually is, but when it's set on multiply, it really will add that shadow. So I want to go with a cooler shadow here, so more of a purple shadow to balance off of the orange of the tiger, and a warmer light wrapping around the tiger. Warm light will give you cool shadows, cool light will give you warm shadows. Here I've created a new layer and set it to overlay. I've selected a nice bright yellow. And here I'm going to do that one more time, create another overlay layer, and add some extra lighting to make it pop a little bit more. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found that video helpful. Please let me know in the comments what areas of digital painting you may be struggling with. That way I can make videos specifically for that. Until then, keep chasing your dreams, and until next time, my friends.